Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to be doing another one in my all-time classic series. In these videos I don't put much editing, no funny intros or anything, and slightly different to my other content therefore. So today we're looking at our first niche fragrance in the list, and that's Green Irish Tweed here by the House of Creed. And if you enjoy this type of video, guys, as well as all the other types that I do, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, then you won't miss any of my content. As you can see, I've got one of the old style 75ml bottles which have this green label on them. The modern bottle and the old 120ml ones looked like this, a picture in the corner of the screen there. I actually really like the design of these old bottles, but most people nowadays will think of Green Irish Tweed as being the one in the black bottle from the House of Creed. So, as I've been doing in some of my other videos in this series, we're going to have a little bit of background information on the fragrance house behind the fragrance. So our first niche fragrance house. Now, Creed is a very, very well-known French niche fragrance house, and famously founded apparently way back in 1760, and until very recently their boxes bore the words de père en fille depuis 1760, meaning from father to son until 1760. However, in I think 2019, I think it was towards the end of last year, a private equity firm, BlackRock, bought them out, so they are no longer passing the family business down from father to son. I believe Olivier Creed and Erwin Creed, the father and son team who were in charge of the house, are still going to be involved with the brand, but they don't actually own it. So we've got the end there of 260 years as a family business, which is a little bit sad in a way. So the brand is based in Paris. It's a French brand, but actually it was founded in England way back in 1760. There's some debate about this. Many people do dispute the heritage of the brand and say that there's not enough evidence that they actually go back that far and they only came around and became what they are today, or really the heritage only goes back to maybe the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, depending who you ask. However, I sincerely doubt they could actually make up brazen fibs about this kind of stuff, so I'm going to tend to pretty much believe the official story, which is what I'm going to give you here. So that the house, or the company Creed, was founded by James Henry Creed back in the 1760s, or in 1760 in fact. Now, it has been well known as a niche fragrance brand perhaps since the 1980s, but it's obviously been going a lot longer than that, if you believe the official story. By 1854, the brand had relocated to Paris. I don't actually know the full reason for what happened there. And from then onwards, it became a very, very prestigious company, working with some of the royal houses of Europe, the Tsars of Russia, Austrian emperors and empresses. Napoleon III and his wife apparently were patrons of the brand. One of the earliest fragrances, and I think it is officially the oldest one we have evidence of, and which I believe modern iterations of still can be got today. It's not one of their mainstream fragrances, but I've been sent a sample by somebody, so I think they kind of do a special release now and again. And that's Royal English Leather, which came out in 1781. At that time, back in England, Creed was the king of England's glove maker, because they were originally a company that did men's clothing, gloves, fine accoutrements, that kind of thing. They're basically a tailoring company. But the king requested some fragrance to scent his leather gloves while he was out hunting, and thus was born Royal English Leather. Going on from there, fast forwarding a bit, I'm not going to do a huge history lesson on the brand here. Let's just skip to 1956. Apparently they created Grace Kelly's wedding day scent, which is Fleurissimo, which I believe you can still get, a very nice female fragrance. Let's finally get to the subject of the video then, Green Irish Tweed. I think it's fair to say, whatever you think about what I've said before now, that the real breakthrough, the cornerstone moment when we can say that the modern history of Creed really kicked off was with the release of Green Irish Tweed in 1985. This, for many years, was their flagship masculine fragrance, and it is a true classic. I think many people, whether they love it or whether it's not quite their cup of tea, would have to admit it's a pretty significant fragrance in the history of men's fragrances. So the perfumer for this one was Olivier Creed. Officially, this is a little bit interesting, and we get a lot of this with Creed. So Olivier Creed was the gentleman. His son Erwin Creed is now involved in the brand and has been involved in some of the releases of the last 10 or 15 years. But throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s, into the early 2000s, Olivier Creed was the main man. He's officially the man behind most of the flagship fragrances we know today. But many people, it really is kind of almost accepted as an unspoken truth, or actually rather widely spoken truth, believe that Pierre Bourdon was the actual perfumer for this fragrance. He also has created many, many classic men's designer fragrances, including famously Coros for Yves Saint Laurent in 1981. Interestingly, many people in the know have mentioned to me that they are pretty darn sure that he also was involved in, or perhaps simply was, the perfumer for Creed's Aventus in 2010. I could not possibly comment, and I don't know. Green Irish Tweed, then. It's a fougere scent representing a walk in the Irish countryside, effectively. Let's have a little look at a quote from Creed themselves. They say about this one that a classic, as the old adage tells us, never goes out of style. Like a perfectly tailored suit, Green Irish Tweed has been and continues to be worn by confident men at the peak of their field, evoking the lush greenery of the Emerald Isle, cut grass, spring meadows, summer wild flowers and herbs warmed by a gentle sea breeze. Tweed suggests Creed's equestrian tailoring routes, country squires and their estates, shooting parties and hip flasks. So that's the kind of image Creed wants to give us. So all of that sounds lovely, but it also sounds a little bit like it could be a fragrance, perhaps, that's going to be preferred by older men, people who want to be considered gentlemanly and have that kind of old-style aristocratic air about them. And indeed, some of the celebrities I find listed as wearers of this fragrance are all rather mature people, I think it's fair to say. Cary Grant is one of them, very famously the old star of the 50s and 60s. Now, I think this must include the idea that he wore it, therefore, before it was actually released. Often Creed create bespoke fragrances, so the story goes, for celebrities. And this one, some people say, was created for actor Cary Grant. And so that's an interesting story. Again, we cannot verify that. Other wearers include George Clooney, Robert Redford, Prince Charles of England, Clint Eastwood, Russell Crowe, and Robbie Williams. So that's, some men, all of whom are now in the mature years of their life, except, maybe Robbie Williams and Russell Crowe might cling to the idea that they're middle-aged. Perhaps, probably George Clooney would too. Anyway, I'm also a big fan of it too, and I'm 43 years old now. So for you people over 30, this is the kind of fragrance I think you might well want to consider. Let's talk about the actual fragrance notes on this one, because that's rather an important side of the whole thing. So it's a beautiful, fresh, grassy fragrance. It's officially an aromatic fougere, but it's not nearly as mossy or barbershop-ish as some of the other classics in that genre. The note listing lists lemon, verbena, peppermint, violet leaves, iris, sandalwood and ambergris. So, the price, by the way, the official price on Selfridges in the UK, the 100ml bottle that is now the size which replaced the old 120 mils, that retails at £230. You will find this now and again if you find a safe, reputable discounter online. Many of them may have it for a slightly lower price, so you may not have to spend quite that much. There's also a 50ml bottle available. So it's a very grassy green fragrance. It opens with a beautifully natural opening. I really enjoy the opening on this fragrance. It's very natural smelling. It's very much an outdoorsy smell. I get a lovely blast of lemon verbena, which is a slightly lemony, leafy, unique kind of scent to me, and I love anything with a good dose of lemon verbena. I definitely pick up on this peppermint note. There's definitely a sort of mintiness, which you have to be careful with that. You don't want your fragrance to smell like toothpaste, but we're really thinking of fresh mint leaves. Speaking of leaves, the violet leaves are also there playing their rather distinctive floral role, and there's definitely a lot of floral stuff, maybe indistinct or hard to identify floral tones in here. It really does actually put a smile on my face, and I just re-smelt it. I've got it on a strip here as I'm talking, actually. I re-sniffed it for the first time in a couple of months or so for this video, and I really was reminded of how excellent it is. I really must mention then my bottle's age is 2015. Some say the fragrance is not as good as it used to be. Let me know what you think about that. So it's beautifully fresh, it's classy, it's bright, it's breezy, and it's a very gentlemanly kind of smell. There's an undertone of a little bit of sandalwood woodiness, and the classic Creed ambergris thing is there to an extent. Another key player in the notes and how it smells is dihydromercenol, a very important synthetic ingredient, which was also in Cool Water from Davidoff, which Pierre Bourdon, allegedly the perfumer for this one, made for Davidoff in 1988, allegedly as basically a cheap knockoff of his own creation. You'll also find that Accord in Platinum Egoist, which has a little bit of a similarly kind of soapy, fresh feel. It's a sort of synthetic, clean, sweet and woody tone, which is also used, actually, that aroma chemical, in many cheap cleaning products, which is perhaps the reason why at my local gym I often felt that it was strange that I seemed to get a whiff of Green Irish Tweed every time I went in the toilets. They obviously used it was in the air freshener. However, the fragrance is true class. There's this naturalness, this sharpness, this real feeling that you've just breathed in outdoors somewhere with very verdant, vibrant plant life around you in a good way. There are many imitations of this, but none of them quite capture that magic. It seems that a clone, a cheap imitation, can get about 80 or 85% of this one dead right. The dry down, the smell in the air, you can get pretty darn close. So some of the cheap imitations, which I'll leave you to Google or look up on YouTube, are not bad at all. You could get some really quite good imitations of this for very low prices, but they never quite have the magic. There's something special. Maybe it's a captive ingredient that only Creed can use that makes this one so gentlemanly, so classy, and so far away from the run-of-the-mill fragrances out there which smell very similar but just don't quite have that extra 10% or that 5%. Downside on this one, I have worn it a few times, or at least once, and somebody said, "Oh, you're wearing Cool Water, aren't you?" So it does smell quite similar to Davidoff's Cool Water, and that's a bit disappointing. If you spent all this money, you may as well have just bought that for £15.99. The performance is an upside. I find my 2015 bottle to be, let's not say beast mode or phenomenal, but good. I would say above average in performance. However, please discuss and debate in the comments below what's happened in the more recent ones. I know there is a thing of vintage Green Irish Tweed being, the old bottles are better. A lot of people think since about 2016 or so, it's really gone downhill. You get that a lot with Creed fragrances and fragrances in general. However, if you're looking for your first foray into the world of niche fragrances, maybe a more mature and classy smell, but not something quite as stuffy as their famous Bois de Portugal, one of my favourites. Something that's pretty versatile and can be worn in any occasion. Creed's Green Irish Tweed is a great place to start. It's one of the first niche fragrances I ever tried, and it's still one of the ones I really can't fail to say that this is a 10 out of 10 fragrance, a true all-time classic. Guys, let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Whatever you're doing in life, let's project. Bye-bye.
It